guess. So
Awesome. Sounds good.
okay. So my first question is, what concepts are there to measure results of successful PR campaigns through social media? Like, how would someone measure a Twitter party, for example?
Got it. Okay, so you remember, let me take this out of my ears, I'm not hearing just myself. So you remember for measurement, there's no set formula. So really what it comes down to is you have to set measurable objectives first. So you have to know what you want to get out of it. What's the goal? Are you trying to increase sales? Are you trying to drive people back to your website? Are you trying to gain followers for later, build relationships? Are you just trying to get the word out there, get the name out there? And based on that, based on your specific objectives for your company, that should drive what you do. So everyone might have Twitter parties for different reasons, and then, or whatever they're doing. And then that will also drive the metrics that you're using based on the objectives. So I would say there's no silver bullet. Ultimately, it comes down to very specific measurable objectives.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. The connection just keeps going in and out.
I know it kind of froze for me for a second too.
Okay, cool. So, okay, so the next question is, how does someone decide the most appropriate methods when assessing a client's needs and measuring their efforts?
How do they decide the most appropriate methods? So when measuring a client's needs?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, it's kind of that same similar that you have to go through the process of getting everybody in the same room. So the first step is I would get everybody in the same room to figure out what are our objectives for listening. And remember, objectives for listening are different than measurement objectives. So why do we want to listen? Do we want to listen for customer service? Do we want to listen for opportunities to grow our brand, to get our name in front of people? What are the reasons that we're listening? What's the point? And then from there, you put a plan in place. So if we figure out our objectives, this is what we want to do, this is what we're hoping to get out of it at the end. And then we put a plan in place where you say, okay, this is what we're going to do to get there. And with that plan, you put measurable goals in place. So we say, this is what we're going to do to try to get there. And based on that, here are our SMART goals that we're going to try to measure. And then those are tied to metrics. It's kind of a one step at a time process like that.
Okay, cool. So in social media measuring, what are the areas that should be measured most often? And would qualitative data be better than quantitative data, or would they not really be in competition?
Good. Okay, you froze for part of that, so I hope I caught the whole question.
Okay.
Yeah, that was weird. So, good question. So quantitative and qualitative, I say, you really need both. I wouldn't have just one or just the other. One thing that I do think is really important within that qualitative is getting context. So understanding what people are actually talking about. So remember how I said you might have more conversations about your brand than anybody else. And the question is that good or is that bad? Well, the answer is you don't really know, because you might have 100% negative conversations and your competitor might have 100% positive conversations, even though there's a lot less. So you really need that balance to tell the whole story. You need to have quantitative and qualitative. So again, phone tells the whole story. You need the context of everything coming together.
Okay.
And did I answer the second part? Because I think I missed part of it.
Yeah, no, the second part was whether qualitative or quantitative data was comparable or not. So.
Got it. Okay. So hopefully I answered that. Good.
Okay. So my next question is, for social media sites that don't offer the analytics service, how do you measure?
So like if you're talking about a property that you don't own, for example?
So if Instagram didn't, well, I'm not sure if Instagram does track analytics, but if Instagram didn't track analytics, like how would you track the analytics for a website that doesn't have analytics?
That doesn't have analytics. Yeah, it can be really difficult. There are some tools like Statagram that are just coming out. So typically when a new tool comes out, some version of some free tool, whether it's kind of hacked together, will come out at some point, but it's often difficult. Sometimes it can be a really manual process where you actually have to go in there and look directly at using something that's a little bit more sophisticated. So sometimes it's literally going in there with a spreadsheet and making notes and looking at it firsthand and doing kind of that level one research that way. So it's unfortunately there's no simple answer to that. If there's not a tool for it, sometimes it's literally just brute force that will get you there.
Okay, cool. So when do you decide that the use of a social media campaign is necessary for a client? Like, what steps do you take for?
Okay, so I don't actually execute social media campaigns. I mostly just track them. But let's see, in terms of when they should be used. So here's my thought. I think the difference is, gosh, you can see the sun is really coming in. So we've always traditionally worked in this world of campaigns, right? So we've had a campaign is something that starts and ends. It's usually set on a set budget for a set number of months that you're funding for so long. The thing is, social media, people try to kind of cram the campaign mentality into social media, but the problem is that you really can't do that because it's an ongoing. Am I breaking up? You froze for a second.
Yeah, you were for a second.
Okay, so for example, if you're listening, you can't just say, well, I'm going to listen during this campaign from this date to this date. You have to really commit to it, because once you start putting yourself out there, there's an expectation that you'll continue. So before you start, you need to know that you're committed to it. You need to know that you're in a place where this is like a long haul, long-term thing, and it can be integrated into other campaigns, but I don't think it should ever stand alone. I wouldn't say you should have just a social media campaign on its own necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you need to have more of a strategic approach where the people who are working on it they're thinking big picture integrated marketing versus what's my social media campaign, what's my television campaign, what's my other campaign, and I'll be all be committed to the long term and know that if you set up these platforms and you're setting an expectation that you're listening to people and you're responding to people and you're engaging with people, that you're not just going to stop when the campaign ends.
Okay. Alrighty, so my next question is, and I know you talked about it a little bit in class, but I still just want to get your opinion for the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And are methodologies like CIE and CIV valid ways to measure success or failure of social media campaigns, or no?
Wait, say that again. Say the question again?
Sorry. Okay, so are you familiar with the CIE or the CIV methodologies?
I don't know that I am actually.
Okay. Well, the customer influence effect is when one idea, I guess, represents the influence of an individual on another individual or a group.
Mm-hmm.
So it affects, well, it talks about the effect this individual would have on another individual or on another group or something, or the influence it would have. And customer influence value is where you assign a numeric score to an influencer.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think those are, or either or, are valid ways to measure like the success or failure of a campaign?
On their own, I wouldn't say so.
Mm-hmm.
I would say they might be tools to be used to figure out where to start in terms of actually who to reach out to, who to build relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times you have these customer scores like clout and kind of arbitrary. If you have a comparison point, yes, maybe if you're comparing month to month, what this kind of index number looks like across the board.
Mm-hmm.
It's context, so you might see a change. It shows you one bit of context. On its own, I've never seen that used as a method for measuring the success of a campaign.
Okay, cool. So my next question is, in your opinion, what is the next up and coming social media site?
Up and coming social media sites. Gosh, if I knew that, I would be really rich, wouldn't I?
That's true.
I don't know that I can answer that question. I see a Medium, but that's kind of more of a blogging platform.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely see Medium gaining some traction. In terms of a total standalone site, it's really hard to know, and so you kind of just have to keep an eye out on where conversations are happening, what people are linking to. I think that this isn't really a new platform, but I think that I'm seeing an increase in the use of photos and videos, including people linking to it. And I think that that's important when you're going to look at how people are talking about your brand or where people are talking about your brand. You know, they might be talking on Twitter, but it's actually driven by, let's say, YouTube, or it's driven by photos, it's driven by something. They have that integration, people cross-linking from one place to the other. I think that's something that I've seen an increase in and probably will continue.
Okay. I think this is my last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And what analytic tools are useful for measuring social media?
Well, as you know, there are many.
Yeah.
And so it really comes down to your own goals. So remember the assignment that we did where we picked a monitoring tool. You really need to set out what are my goals, what are my non-negotiables, what are the things that I need. And then from there, you need to analyze what tool is best for that. So there are hundreds of different tools. We often use Radian 6. You know, we'll be using Radian 6 in this class. We use Sysomos. We use Unify. These are tools that I like and that have worked well for the brands that I've worked with, but again, there's no single answer, unfortunately. So it really comes down to the specifics of what you're looking for and what your company really needs at the end of the day.
Okay, cool. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you. Do you have any questions for me, or
Well, just keep me posted on, so you're putting this together, is it a paper, or how is this, what's the final presentation of this look like?
We'll